Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Making Sense of It All and part of our Professional at Anything But Golf series. I'm happy to welcome David Ford. He is the head of coaching and player partnerships for Clipped. And as always, I'm happy to have Wes Altus, who is the head of instruction over at Top Golf in Jacksonville, Florida. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Great to meet both of you guys and really looking forward to our chat.
So, high level, before we dive into you or anything about the company, tell our audience what Clipped is, what you guys do.
Okay, so Clipped is really it's a platform and it's about data analytics, but ultimately it's just about helping players to understand their game and just enable them to make better decisions, how they play, how they practice, how they work with their instructors.
So, I was first introduced to this through, kind of through our conversation and through us speaking and you sharing the platform with me. And I always kind of thought of Arcos was the thing that I thought of. But you guys really take what Arcos collects, like that type of data, and you make it usable. You make it actually something that's actionable that they can do something with, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work with Arcos, we work with other sort of stats platforms, as
Right.
people would know them as. And rather than just looking back at what's happened, telling you what's happened, like traditional stat platforms, we use all the data to kind of understand a player's DNA and how does that help us to look forwards. So we do have some pretty high level predictive analytics in there, but that just helps us to understand the golfer. So we're just looking at it in a very different way.
No doubt. Wes, I got to imagine that's fairly exciting as an instructor, as somebody who's looking to help people get better. When you see tools that are actually actionable and usable, that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, especially getting someone new in front of you, is you don't have a lot of data to go off with. All you can do is buy what they feel they need to work on, and 90% of the time, that's not it. And especially with our target audience, trying to pick the lowest hanging fruit to improve their scores. Stuff like, what Clipped is, it gives us a roadmap to at least see, hey, yeah, you're approaching to the green is fine. It's just when you miss the green, you can't get up and down. It takes you four shots. So it's stuff like that. I'd work on their chipping, not their ball striking. And it makes the lesson more effective and also honestly gives more value to the student because you're actually getting their score lower instead of just working on swing mechanics.
No doubt. We're going to dive into all of this stuff. But before we do, David, tell me a little bit about yourself. What was it? How did you get involved in Clipped? How was this something that even came to be?
Yeah, so I mean, I've played golf all my life, so I've loved it since I was sort of 6, 7 years of age. And to be perfectly honest with you, I started playing golf. I was a member at the oldest golf course in England, and data, statistics, technology were probably the furthest thing from my mind when I grew up playing golf.
Yes.
But as I sort of grew up and obviously mature a little bit anyway, but came to understand as I didn't have the same sort of level of the amount of time to play the game, how actually any sort of information could really help to just make me more efficient in my game. And so I was involved in an indoor simulator business in London. We had 3 venues, and during that time, I got to know these two guys, Ed and Piers, who've been to Oxford University together, played on the varsity team there, and they just started talking to me about this idea they had about aggregating data in golf. And there's so much data out there, people aren't connecting it, and it kind of stemmed from there. And I just saw this opportunity to do something really exciting in the game. And I'd always thought that people overcomplicated the game. You read articles, read books. Some teachers, they make it sound really complex, but ultimately it should be pretty straightforward and simple. And I think people just get lost in all this information overload. So I wanted to really work on this. We're all aligned. How do we simplify everything for people to just help them just get better faster?
No doubt. I mean, Wes always talks. I always asked him. This has gone back, longer than I've known you. But just he's a huge advocate of people using Arcos and using something to collect their data because it helps them have something factual to lean back on. Yes, Wes?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I try and get all my students to, at least do a trial version of Arcos. That way, they can see the value in it. And for what you're getting, like with a lot of these programs, it's worth the money if you're serious about lowering your handicap and your scores. I mean, traditional stats, just fairways and greens, they're not telling the whole story or putts per round. That's not giving me much information to really go on.
Well, and not to knock Arcos or any of those data collection parts of it, but I will tell you, David, when you actually introduced me to Clipped, it's usable, it's actionable, it's taking that data and it's saying, okay, Jesse, here's what you should be doing, here's where you should be spending your time, here's some things that you can practice to get better. So I thought that was fantastic, really, that it's kind of next level, if you will, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think one of the sort of cores to how well it works for you, how it helps it to be, understandable is the metrics that we've built within it. Now, a lot of people will be familiar with strokes gained. Obviously, Arcos, great product, uses strokes gained. We hear about it on the tour all the time, but a lot of people still don't necessarily understand the ins and outs of it. And one of the things we wanted to do was we knew there was more than strokes gained. There's a lot of variables in the game. You can play in 25-mile-an-hour wind. You can be playing at altitude. All of these things have a real impact on how hard a shot is. And ultimately, if you can factor all of that in, you get a better understanding of the player. So you can understand their DNA. And, we fundamentally believe that every golfer is unique. There's no such thing as the average five handicap, for example. And our metric, shot quality and player quality, helps us to define that DNA of the player so we can be really specific to their needs, their requirements. And I think that's one of the things that, while in itself is quite complex under the surface, the way we present it hopefully is simple enough for people to understand. And that's really, the purpose of what we're trying to do, just try and make it simple so people can just be efficient with their time.
No doubt. Well, and you guys integrate with other pieces of technology that people are utilizing, whether it is Arcos. I know we've kind of beat that one a little bit here, but Garmin devices, all kinds of stuff. There are you guys have APIs written with these companies and with their softwares to where that data can come into your system. And again, it's actionable, it's usable. It's stuff that you guys are collecting the data and then spitting back usable information to myself as that, professional at anything but golf person who wants to get better. You're actually giving me things. You're saying, here's what you need to do to be actually improve your scores, improve the way you play this game.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, one of the things I realized very early on when I was back in the day in the indoor golf business was that any way you're hitting a golf ball, it's got some value. Now, particularly people in the business world, they're not getting to practice every day of the week. They may be on the lunch break. They get down to an indoor studio, they hit some balls. And so we look at things and go, okay, how can we integrate that data, that technology, to make it meaningful and useful? Because, it's not nothing hitting those balls. So we wanted to really look at that. And, we're still pretty early on in our integrations, but we're working with a lot of companies and really looking forward to some exciting sort of announcements over the next 6-12 months. But ultimately, we feel that anything that can have an impact on your golf, practice, teaching, sleep even. I know we talked a lot about, the glucose levels and that sort of stuff. All of that can be really important. So if we can help just to include that and elevate and just accelerate understanding, then, that's really something we feel really strongly about.
I got to imagine from the backside of it as well, just like selfishly for you guys as a company, you're collecting so much data, and that there's also got to be usable pieces like outside of just helping the golfer directly, but for the industry and for, like we said, medical data, where you can actually overlay medical data with, how you're performing in a round of golf. It's pretty cool. It's pretty. If you can find some trends there, that you're actually helping a greater good, if you will. Not just their scores in the game of golf.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. We are starting to work with more sort of companies, businesses, organizations, but like I said, we're still pretty early on. We're pretty ambitious, and I would say, on the ladder, we're probably at rung one at the moment. We've got a pretty sophisticated product, but we're not just going to stop and quit where we're at the moment. We really, feel strongly about doing some great things.
No doubt.
And with you going down those roads of these different avenues, I think, player performance is so not talked about, especially on social media and where people like to get their info. So just hydration levels and being able to track that data via like a Whoop or something and see how that ties into your scores beginning of the round, middle of the round, end of the round can shave a couple shots right there off of the people that really don't want to practice all that much.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll give you a little anecdote, and I tend to be the kind of the crash test dummy in our company. I get sent out with all sorts of technology and a long way before it gets into the product. But this is going back 2, 3 years, and I was playing for me, some pretty good golf at the time, hitting 14, 15, sometimes 16 greens around, but shooting like 75, 76, which is it's like banging your head against the wall.
Hmm.
And I was just looking at the data, going to see putting specialists, just like this can't be. I need to sort something out. I need a new putter, or I need to work on my technique. And they were all saying, actually, it looks pretty good. It's like, it's pretty tight, not too much wrong with that. And then we were sort of in the early stages of testing with Whoop and Arcos as well. So we had GPS timestamp data for each of those. And as soon as we pulled it together, it was obvious. It was like, as soon as I stepped foot on the green, my heart rate was going through the roof. And I was just a mess. And
Yeah.
it just showed me I've been spending all this time on, putters, technique. Well, I just needed to learn how to function as a human being. And
Yeah.
actually, just being introduced to the guys at Neuropeak Pro, they have their Intel belt product, which is fantastic. And I just trained how to breathe properly. And it's incredible how something like that, you get complete control, you can function, and it can be used outside of that, that golf environment, obviously in a business environment. Um, and it could have saved me so much time if I just had that information early on. And so I think that's one of the challenges with lots of data. How do we just, you know, reduce that learning curve?
Yeah.
I think a big part of what I see and the thing even from hearing our conversation and the conversations that we've had in the past is that there's work that you got to put in up front. If you put in the work up front to identify the reasons why you do things the way you do things, or the reasons why you score the way you score, and if what feels complicated up front or what feels like a lot to do up front ends up simplifying the game so much, like moving forward for the rest of the time that you play it. You put that effort in, and you put these things in place to help you, and then from that point forward, you understand yourself and your game so much better than what you would if you just keep doing trial and error.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, particularly for your listeners, they're not, they've got a limited amount of time. So
100%.
if you've got an hour to practice in a week, make sure you're using that wisely. Don't go and practice on things you think you're terrible at, things that are going to have that impact. It goes back to what Wes was saying before. We create these narratives in our head. We can use data to be more efficient. Then it's just the results just come that much faster. So it's just about creating that efficiency, and just it's going to help you enjoy the game more, which is what we all want at the end of the day.
Absolutely. No
Yeah.
doubt.
I
No
mean,
doubt.
being clear on what, your objective is, let's say it is like for me, like has to be a swing change or something. There's still like most times people are so cluttered, they don't even know, they can't even take the club back. They got five things going on here. If we can narrow it down to like one or two and do the same thing with when they understand, you're like, hey, my chipping sucks 25 yards and in, that hour they have to spend, they can do a little bit more practice there. I never like to take someone's strengths away and just over practice a weakness, but at least they can dedicate and have a very strict like blueprint on, hey, focus on this for a few extra minutes, but we'll keep the practice, relatively the same, especially when you're only got an hour a week.
Yeah, and I think it's important to get feedback about things that you're good at. I mean, as
Hmm.
golfers, we always dwell on the negatives,
Yep.
but it's great to get feedback from around. You did that great. You're actually good at this. Because
Hmm.
people can get skewed. They might play with someone who hits a really long ball, and they
Yeah.
convince themselves that they're terrible off the tee. But actually, if you can show them in the data, confidence breeds confidence, and it's just like, there we go. So it can be so helpful, and it doesn't take a lot of time to invest in that, but like you're saying, Wes, you're spending $150 or $200 on a lesson. You want to make sure you're getting into the right things when you're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, the pre-interview process with some people is laughable. It's like, oh, how do you hit your driver? Oh, I hit that great, but I suck at my irons. So I'm like, no, you kind of suck at both. Like, both are really bad. I don't know what, but they might have had just that round before they came in. They may have hit the ball great off the tee, and so it's not registering sometimes that, hey, yeah, you had one good round. That doesn't mean it's fixed. Like having the data there to say, hey, I was trending on that round, but if you look at the overall performance, it's not there. It was just a flash in the pan, an outlier. So I love the idea of having some kind of data to almost kind of keep the player themselves in check on what's really going on.
Well, and let's get into it, because that was one of the things I was really appreciative about, David, is you shared clips with me so I could put some rounds in and actually kind of look at it for myself. And I will say this to my audience. I'll say that, and Wes has heard me say this before. If somebody asked me where my weaknesses were as a golfer before I ever looked at anything, I would have said off the tee and approach shots into the green. And after putting four rounds in, which I consider decent rounds, definitely representative of what my game is, when I looked at it, where it actually was around the green. And I would have said I was pretty good around the greens. I would have said that was actually a strength. And it's interesting because it's just factual data. You can't argue with it. It's showing you how you stack rank compared to people who are, either at your level, if they're people that are a 5 handicap, a scratch golfer, or a professional golfer. And it was very eye-opening, I can tell you that.
Yeah, it often is. I mean, we see the same from, 28 handicappers being surprised what they see to, tour players all the way in between. And it's just useful to see that information. It's great to see your stuff coming through, and it wasn't just those rounds of golf. Obviously, enabled you to practice, and I saw some tests
Yeah.
come through as well. And I think it's important if you're working on a part of your game, you did a lot of putting tests, that you're getting feedback on how you're doing in those tests, so you can see, okay, next time I do that, am I improving? I think that's a really big part of practice and training those skills. You want feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you can't lie to data. Go ahead, Wes.
Yeah, it was feedback to me is invaluable via video or just, the games and drills, as David was saying, being able to track that stuff. And most people won't take the time to do a simple practice drill. But I also think if you've got something concrete to be like, hey, I did this drill, I did well on it, and they slowly start seeing that come up on the golf course, then they get the buy-in. I think the buy-in is one of the hardest things to get through, the golfer that doesn't have enough time. You kind of have to buy in and work on it just a little bit, and you will see progress because your focus and gamifying, their practice sessions is massive for their performance out on the golf course.
Yeah, I think we also. Oh, sorry, Jesse. Just
No, go for it, please.
saying, because we allow the coaches and the players to connect within the platform, or instructors, as I guess you guys are more used to calling them over there. They get to sort of see that and actually, interact with the players. They see a test has come up. Great work. Good to see you doing that. And I think it just, it helps that relationship. You feel like you're getting supported along the way. Your instructors giving you a little thumbs up there or giving you some feedback. I think that can be a good motivator as well. We see that we work with a lot of college programs, and it's a slightly different thing with them. A lot of the time, the coach is backing the whip and they have to do things, but it's a good way of just making people accountable. I think a lot of people respond really well to that.
Yeah.
So are there any, as you guys have been collecting this data and as you guys have been putting, all of this together, is there anything that stands out to you as kind of either like an unintended consequence or something that has come up that you were surprised at as you guys kind of sort through the data? Or is it kind of you see what you expect a little bit?
I mean, from our perspective, we did we had a lot of data to work with before we even started on this, so we knew a lot going in. There's always some things about tendencies that we learn about players, but I guess the thing people talk about. I'll give you an example. Like downhill left to right putts. They're really, they're really hard. But actually, you find that some people are much better at downhill left to right putts, and you realize that actually a lot of these myths about certain types of holes or certain types of shots,
Hmm.
it really comes across that everybody is unique, and
Mhm.
there's this whole mishmash of skills, and that's why it's so useful to look at your own data rather than compare against the tour or whoever. And I think that's been the biggest learning, is that people can really understand what good looks like for them rather than against specific benchmarks. It's obviously great to understand, okay, what is that broad line, but we are all unique, and it's interesting. I mean, we've seen, I guess one of the things we've seen is the players on the PGA Tour. Yes, they are incredibly good, but we still, because we do so much within the college game, there's kind of a few things that those who follow that level wouldn't be surprised that the best drivers of the ball in college golf are among the best drivers of the ball in the world. Um,
Mhm.
but it's quite alarming how it really drops from, them pretty much across D1. They're consistently world-class drivers of the ball. But the closer they get to the hole, the further they become from the PGA Tour. And it's quite alarming actually to see even the best sort of college players are that sort of margin below, below the tour players.
It's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here, but it, the refined skills, the things that take a little while to get better at, are the ones that probably they have to put the effort into. Whereas if they're they learn how to swing it fast as a kid, they mature into their bodies, and they're between 18 and 22 years old. They're probably swinging it as fast as they ever will. So that kind of makes sense to me when you put a little thought when you put some thought behind it.
Yeah, no, for
Yeah.
sure. And I think it's that golfing IQ, the thing that, I've kind of long thought that, across the board, we're probably at a stage in golf where generally people have probably never swung the club as well and hit the ball as
Mhm.
well as in history, but the golf IQ is probably as low as it's ever been. In
Yes.
terms of learning how to actually score, how to play the game rather than just hit the ball. I think that's a big divide. And, there are plenty of examples where people are sort of making a little niche in there,
Mhm.
in terms of that strategy piece. And I think that's a really important element that is probably overlooked by a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's amazing to go out with a student for the first time and watch what they actually do on the golf course. You're just like, yep, now I see why you shoot 98, 99 all the time. It's like really dumb decisions most of the time, and not understanding, getting a little closer to the hole is actually better than trying to lay back sometimes. So it's always interesting to see how they want to move around a golf course, and it's like completely backwards.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll speak for the folks out there, as far as I think sometimes, especially when you get outside of those competitive golfers, and you get into people who are playing it recreationally or playing, for business or for anything else, just the nature of it. Sometimes their attentiveness isn't there, their plan isn't there. So I think, especially if they walk away from the round disappointed, saying, "Well, I could have shot better, I could have done better." That's where I think a lot of this comes into play. Where if you put the work in prior to, if you have a plan, if you have a blueprint before you ever go out there, then you don't necessarily have to think on your feet. You did your homework prior to. You did all you put that kind of put that in place. And I think tools like this help people do those types of things.
Yeah, sometimes just having an awareness, you might not even have worked on a skill, just having an awareness of a tendency can just help you massively on the golf course. If you know you've got a short right miss, get one more club and aim a little bit further left. And you're not having to
Yep.
change any technique. It's just, using the information, and it's going to help you. So completely agree with that.
100%. So if people are listening to this, and I can't imagine that they're not interested, I can't believe that they're not just a little curious. But if they are, what's the best way for them to take a look at Clipped and see if it's for them?
So if they just go to clipped.com, so it's clippd.com, and on our website, either on your mobile or on desktop, just in the top right corner, you'll see take a free trial. Everybody who signs up gets a free 30-day trial. Just try it out. put some rounds in there. I definitely encourage you to reach the threshold of 3 rounds, because our what to work on feature, which is really that forward-looking, understanding your DNA, that kind of lights up after 3 rounds, and then that'll really give you that guide going forward. So, take advantage of the 30-day free trial, share it with your friends, get your coach involved, and I think that's obviously the best way to look at it. And we've got lots of information on our website, YouTube. We've got tutorial videos, all that sort of good stuff as well.
And I'll give you guys a testimonial. I think what he's saying about putting the 3 rounds in, it's absolutely key, because it's going to tell you, it's going to give you that next level data as far as identifying what you do well, what you're doing poorly, where you need to put work and effort into it. So I think that's fantastic. David, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I think what you guys are doing is, it's great work. It's eye-opening. I think it's things that truly help people get better if they want to get better at the game of golf.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Jesse and Wes. It's been a pleasure, getting to know you these last few weeks. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do with your game, Jesse.
To be continued. I hope that we continue this, and I look forward to having you on the show again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, David.